Okay, good morning, everyone. Today I will be talking about five important leadership traits, and we'll be discussing those and breaking them down even farther, and then applying them to leaders who have been successful in the past by using those traits. So, our first one we're going to be talking about, our first topic is inspirational and visionary leadership. So, in the book, they talked about inspirational visionary leadership being one of the most powerful things a leader can do. Um, and this means that leaders create like a compelling vision, or something bigger than just the everyday normal idea. And this gives the followers a purpose and kind of a guidance in a direction that's bigger than just you know the normal everyday. So they're seeing the bigger picture. Um, and this kind of like ignites them and motivates them to help, reach above and beyond just their goals and stuff like that. And so a perfect example of this would be Mr. Steve Jobs. So when Jobs returned back to Apple in 1990, the company was nearly bankrupt. They had no idea of what they wanted to do. They had no sense of direction or anything like that. But when he came back, he had a clear vision of what he wanted to do. So he wanted Apple to create products that were, kind of blended that technology with an artistic design. Um, and this technology was, you know, designed, very simple to use. They looked good, and it changed how we lived our everyday lives. Um, but that was his idea and what he did. But when he got back to the company, he didn't just talk about, what he wanted them to do with the technology or anything like that. He talked about why. And when he told all these stories and stuff, it gave like, kind of a bold imagination, and it drew people in to kind of want to follow him even more, per se. So then he ended up launching the iPod, iPhone, all the Apple products, and then began something that was revolutionary. So our next topic will be talking about strategic leadership and organizational culture. Um, so in the book, they put an emphasis on that a leader can just set a strategy, but they need to have a organizational culture that kind of follows with that strategy in order for everything to kind of come together and be what you want it to be. So one of the most effective examples in time is when Indra Nuya, the former CEO of Pepsi, she saw that customers' preferences were kind of changing a little bit, and people were kind of shying away from just wanting sugary drinks, and instead they wanted something that was going to be healthier, better for them to drink, in the long run. So instead of her like resisting this trend and wanting to stay true to the Pepsi company, she embraced this idea and she launched a strategy that was called Performance with Purpose. And this kind of aimed to transform their product lineup to adapt to fit the wants and needs of the people who were going to be buying her project or product. Um, but the real, magic wasn't just the strategy and what she wanted to do, but it was how she reshaped the company's culture to fit that strategy. She connected people's work to a bigger mission, kind of restructured incentives, and brought in new voices to reflect this direction. Um, and her leadership wasn't just about profit, and it was about having a purpose behind what she wanted to do. She didn't really care about, she cared about, wanting to earn money and do what was best for the company. But at the same time, she wanted a purpose behind what she was doing and wanted to create a culture that everybody else was going to buy into and follow. So our third one is leading organizational change. Change is inevitable, but leading through it, especially when it's uncomfortable or uncertain, is where like the leadership is truly tested. Like, leaders aren't going to want to, a true leader is going to want to embrace that role and try to, figure out and bring people along with them through that role. A non-true leader or whatever will kind of like fold in that situation. So to point out a successful change, leaders provide structure, clarity, and direction, and they anticipate resistance, but they don't back down from it, and that's what makes a good leader a good leader. And they lead with confidence and humility. So one leader who was really good about embodying this trend was Alan Mulally, the former CEO of Ford. So when he joined Ford in 2006, the company was on a serious decline, on the verge of, just going bankrupt, selling out. They were not in a good spot. They were losing billions of dollars and struggling with outdated vehicles and, just not being able to keep up with what the people wanted. So Molly came in and introduced the One Ford strategy. His goal was simple but powerful, and he unified the company around one common mission. He created transparency by holding weekly meetings where executives had to share real, unfiltered updates, and it broke down the barriers and encouraged honesty and teamwork. He also made bold moves like mortgaging the company's assets to avoid government bailout. And one thing he once said was, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance a lot less. His leadership didn't just save Ford, it set a new standard for leading clarity and courage during the crisis. So the fourth topic will be leader-member exchange and building relationships. This series is about the quality of relationships between the leaders and their members, which is extremely important. No member or follower is going to want to follow a leader if, they don't get along, if their relationship is just very poor. There's no trust in between there. So they put a strong emphasis that leaders must build trust and a mutual respect and a personal connection among them and their followers. And they come to find out that the stronger these relationships, the more effective that an organization or business becomes. And I feel like, Nelson Mandela is a very, well-known name about what he did in his life. So after he spent 27 years in prison, I believe Mandela emerged not with bitterness, but with commitment to unity. As the first black president of South America, he faced a nation divided apartheid instead of focusing only on one policy. He focused on the relationships that he could build with his people and gain trust as his followers. And by doing this, he built bridges between, the groups that, never saw eye to eye and they viewed each other as enemies. So by, building that bridge in between the two groups, he was able to unite the country into one. And one example from his, time as president in South Africa was during 1995 in the Rugby World Cup. And rugby was a symbol of white African pride, but Mandela showed up wearing a Springbok jersey and handed the trophy to the white captain, which was, an extraordinary gesture of reconciliation. And yeah, so basically Mandela's ability to gain trust and unite people from both sides was a huge reason why he was successful as a leader. So lastly, we'll be talking about ethical and moral leadership. So in the book, the authors Waldman and O'Reilly, they argue that ethics aren't just nice to have, but they're central to effective leadership. Leaders must model integrity, transparency, responsibility, and they must do these even when it's at an inconvenient time. So Paul Pullman, the former CEO of Unilever, is a perfect example. when he took over, he made one big bold decision, and he stopped reporting quarterly earnings. Nobody knew why he did this, but he later came out and said he didn't want his people to see short-term the pressure, and he didn't want that to get in the way of what was happening in the long term. So when he launched his sustainable living plan through the company, he focused on reducing the company's environmental footprint while improving the health and well-being for billions. He didn't just talk about doing good, but he made it a core part of how his business operated, and he kind of set his standard with how he wanted to run everything on that one idea. And he kind of followed that up with by saying, we cannot close our eyes to the fact that business has a responsibility to society. So basically what he means is, whatever he was doing with his business was very important to also what was going on with society, and how people were living their lives or what they were doing and stuff. So his ethical stance built trust, it boosted employee engagement, and even performed long-term performance by cutting down on focusing what was happening in the near future, and kind of spreading that focus onto what was going to happen in the future. So that was it. Basically, we talked about what we learned and broke down those 5 topics, and basically we learned that in order to be a great leader, the best of the best, you have to have an inspiring vision like Steve Jobs did at Apple. You have to be able to align culture like Indra did at Pepsi. You're going to have to navigate change like Mr. Mullally at Ford. And then you have to build and trust like the great Nelson Mandela. And then you have to lead integrity like Mr. Paul Pullman. So yeah, whether you're leading to, start your own business, lead a team, in the classroom as a young person, young individual, or even a bigger thing such as a national movement or anything like that, these kind of principles are what you need to apply to those situations to be able to be a strong and successful leader. But yeah, so leadership isn't about the power or position that you have, but it's about the impact that you create with the relationships you build and the values you live by. Thank you.